Ever wake up thinking, today, I'm going to be productive? Yeah, that's always the exact moment trouble starts. So I look at this doorknob in my house that's been slightly loose for a week, and I think to myself, I got this? How hard can it be? And right there, ladies and gentlemen, is the hook the moment I said those words. I signed my own sentence. Because the universe hears confidence and responds with, hold my screwdriver. I grab my tool, which is literally the only one I can identify without reading a manual. I march toward the bathroom like I'm about to save lives. Except the only life I'm saving is my pride, which, spoiler alert, doesn't survive. I start fiddling with the screw, feeling good about myself. And just like that, it slips out of my hand and disappears behind the wall like it had a better life to live. At this point, panic sets in. You know that feeling when you try to act calm, but your brain is screaming, we are in deep trouble? Yeah, that. I tried shaking the doorknob, twisting it, whispering to it, even like maybe if I spoke nicely, it would behave. But no, the universe wasn't listening. The doorknob falls completely off, both sides, and I'm standing there holding two sad little pieces of metal, like trophies for my failure. Comes the part every man fears the moment you realize you're trapped in your own bathroom. You yell for help, and they're smart, but you have to pretend like you've got it under control because you already told your wife you could handle it. She opens the door, sees me standing there holding the broken doorknob pieces, and gives me the look. The one that says, really, this is your plan? And I just shrug because what do you say when your DIY project turns into a hostage situation? So we call a professional, and here's the kicker, the guy fixes it in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. I spent a solid hour dismantling my dignity, 2 screws and half a doorknob. He comes in and restores order in less time than it takes me to make toast. And the look he gives me, calm, knowing, slightly pitying, is exactly the reminder I needed. That's the hook. Someone else fixes it effortlessly while you reflect on all the ways you messed it up. And now my life lesson, which I follow religiously: if a doorknob is broken, I don't touch it. I stand back, respect its limits, and call someone who knows what they're doing. Because the truth is, I didn't just try to fix a doorknob, I created a story. Disaster and a life lesson all at once. And that's Nate Bargatze's kind of victory, small, hilarious failures that somehow make the story worth telling. You ever wake up feeling like you're suddenly a competent human being? That's really where the trouble begins. You roll out of bed, stretch, and for no particular reason, your brain convinces you that today is the day you'll be productive, heroic, and capable of handling life's minor inconveniences. That's how I felt when I looked at the bathroom doorknob that had been slightly loose for a week. I thought to myself, I got this. How hard can it be? And right there, ladies and gentlemen, is the hook. The moment I said those words, the universe leaned back in its chair, smiled, and whispered, hold my screwdriver. Confidence is such a dangerous thing. It gives you the illusion of control, the belief that you are in command, while quietly setting you up for total humiliation. Nate's style is all about these relatable, everyday moments where your own mind becomes the first punchline in the story. There's something inherently funny about overconfidence. You can see it in the way people approach any simple task. Pick up a tool, any tool, and suddenly your posture changes, your chest puffs out. You act like you've spent years mastering the craft. You're convinced that the tiniest bit of skill or knowledge is more than enough. The hook here is that overconfidence often disguises complete ignorance. I held that screwdriver like it was Excalibur. They're smart, like somehow the tool itself would give me the knowledge I lacked, and the audience immediately relates to that feeling moment when you think you know exactly what you're doing, even though you have no clue. Then comes the internal monologue, the quiet desperation you try to hide. You tell yourself, okay, just a little turn easy. But deep down, a tiny voice in the back of your brain is already whispering, this is going to end badly. And that's exactly what makes it funny. They're smart. Nate's humor thrives on that tension. The audience knows disaster is inevitable, but the storyteller keeps pushing forward anyway. Smart. There's a charm in the innocence of your own hubris, the way you think for just a second that this is manageable. That moment of misplaced confidence is the hook that draws people in, because we've all been there. We've all stood over some simple task and convinced ourselves we are experts only to be proven hilariously wrong. You also have the social layer of humor. When your spouse or partner looks at you and asks, are you sure? You hear it as a challenge. Not concern, not curiosity, but a direct test of your manhood, your competence, your ability to handle a slightly wobbly screw. That small, simple question becomes part of the setup for the joke. Your pride inflates. You nod, you say, absolutely, I've got this. And that's the hook. The moment your words commit you to disaster, the audience can see exactly what's about to happen before you do. Finally, there's the physicality of confidence. You move toward the doorknob with purpose, like you're stepping into battle. You tighten your grip on the screwdriver, adjust your stance, and maybe even take a deep, dramatic breath. All of these subtle actions communicate to the audience that the story is about to explode. Overconfidence is not just a mental state, it's a visual one. Every move you make tells the audience, disaster incoming. Nate's comedic genius comes from highlighting these tiny human moments, the swagger, the misplaced certainty, the pause before the fall, because that's where laughter begins, in the anticipation of the inevitable. So the stage is set. Overconfidence isn't just the first step, it's the hook, the tension, the spark that ignites the entire story. It's relatable, it's funny, and it's exactly what makes watching someone attempt a simple task so irresistible. After convincing yourself that you are fully capable of handling the situation, the next step is always grabbing the tool. Here's the funny part. You always grab the one tool you actually recognize. In my case, that was the screwdriver. The universe is laughing because this is the tool, but it's also the only one you actually understand at a surface level. You hold it like it's a magic wand, believing that simply touching it will make you competent, when in reality, it's more like holding a ticking time bomb with a fancy handle. Nate's comedic style thrives on this exact tension, the confidence we feel versus the inevitable chaos lurking just around the corner. The audience sees you grasping the screwdriver, puffing your chest, taking on the problem like a hero who hasn't actually read the manual. And they know disaster is about to strike. There's a ritualistic confidence in the way people handle the tools they know. You pick it up, maybe inspect it, adjust your grip, and suddenly feel like a master craftsman. You walk over to the doorknob like you've been trained for years, but in truth, your experience is limited to, I've watched a few videos once. The hook here is in the juxtaposition outwardly. You're calm, precise, heroic. Internally, your brain is screaming, abort mission, abort mission. That internal panic is what makes the story relatable and funny. Everyone has held a tool at some point, thought they could handle a job, and then immediately regretted it. Then comes the first twist of comedy. You start using the tool with confidence that is completely unwarranted. You twist, you wiggle, maybe even give the screw a little pep talk. There's an almost theatrical quality to it, as though the screwdriver and the screw are participants in a delicate dance where one misstep can ruin everything. Nate's humor shines in these subtle exaggerations, the way ordinary objects suddenly gain personality and become actors in a story of escalating chaos. The audience is hooked because they are already imagining what could go wrong, and they know it will be funny when it does. Another layer of humor comes from the struggle between pride and reality. You feel obligated to keep going. Even as the tool slips, the screw resists, and your confidence begins to falter. You adjust your stance, rotate your wrist, maybe even reposition your feet like you're trying to physically influence the outcome. The hook here is that your actions become more dramatic and absurd the worse things get. You are performing a one-man comedy show, and the props just happen to be household tools. And then comes the inevitable moment where the tool betrays you. It slips, it doesn't fit, or it makes a sound that signals impending disaster. You blame the tool, of course, because it's easier than admitting your own lack of skill. This is a classic Nate moment. The humor comes from misplaced confidence, the absurdity of self, delusion, the audience's ability to recognize themselves in that same situation. By the time the tool has completely failed you, they're smart, you're left with a mix of embarrassment, disbelief, and a growing sense of dread. And that's exactly where the hook works. The audience is already laughing at your predicament, knowing that the story is far from over. The simple task was doomed from the moment you picked up the screwdriver. The tool becomes a symbol of both your overconfidence and the chaos that's about to unfold, setting the stage for the full-blown disaster to come. Comes the moment every small DIY disaster has been building toward: the disappearing screw. You're twisting it, feel like you're making progress, confident in your expertise, and then suddenly it slips from your grip and vanishes into the abyss behind the door frame. And not just behind the door frame, like it's hiding in a corner. No, it disappears into some mysterious pocket of the universe, as if it had a better life to live without your meddling. The hook here is instant. Both panic and comedy collide. Nate's storytelling genius thrives on these moments because they're universal. Everyone has experienced that sinking feeling when something tiny, seemingly insignificant, turns your whole plan upside down. The audience instantly relates, laughs, and cringes at the same time because they've been there too. At first, you try to play it cool, like losing a screw is just part of the plan. You kneel down, slowly inspecting the floor, pretending it might have bounced innocently somewhere nearby. You check behind the toilet, under the rug, along the edges of the tile, like a detective investigating a crime scene. The hook is in the absurdity of these actions. The audience can see how irrational they are, and that tension between what you think is plausible and what's actually happening makes it funny. Nate's humor often relies on the contrast between human overconfidence and simple reality, and this is a perfect example. Then comes denial. You tap the wall, whisper to the screw, shake the doorknob gently, even mutter, "Come on, man, stay with me here." You're bargaining with a piece of metal, which is inherently ridiculous, and the audience is hooked because the ridiculousness escalates with every small action. This is classic Nate. He draws humor from relatable human folly. And here, the folly is both immediate and universal. Everyone knows the frustration of a tiny object escaping your control and turning a simple task into an ordeal. As you continue your frantic search, the panic grows. You check behind other objects, shine your phone flashlight into cracks, even stick your hand in places you know logically the screw could never fit. And still, it's gone. Smart. That's where the hook doubles. Now the story is building tension and comedy simultaneously. You are trapped in a loop of futility. The audience is laughing at your growing desperation, anticipating what will happen next. Every failed attempt to retrieve the screw adds to the narrative. Nate's style is all about escalating ordinary problems into extraordinary, hilarious experiences. Finally, acceptance begins to creep in. You start rationalizing, convincing yourself that the screw didn't matter anyway. You tell yourself it was just a tiny screw, probably not essential. The hook here is that everyone knows this is a lie. You needed that screw. The doorknob is teetering on the edge of total collapse. The audience feels the tension between what you're telling yourself and the inevitable consequences. Dissonance fuels the humor. And just when you think it can't get worse, it does. The missing screw becomes the first domino in a cascading disaster. The doorknob wobbles precariously, the latch misaligns, and suddenly you're holding pieces of metal in your hands, wondering how a single lost screw turned a simple home repair into a full-blown catastrophe. The hook here is perfect. Something incredibly small causes massive, relatable chaos, keeping the audience hooked, laughing, and cringing all at once. Just when you think the situation can't get any worse, it does. That's the cruel magic of trying to fix something simple. You've already lost the screw. Now the doorknob decides it's had enough of your meddling. 1 second it's barely hanging, and the next completely detaches from the door, leaving you holding both sides in your hands like some failed magician showing off the remnants of a trick gone wrong. The hook hits immediately. The audience can picture it. They feel the suspense. They're laughing because they know exactly what that moment looks like in real life. Nate's humor thrives in these moments of relatable calamity, where everyday objects suddenly betray you in the most absurd ways imaginable. There's a very specific panic that comes with holding something that used to be functional, but now exists only as broken pieces. You stand there, looking at the doorknob, trying to figure out if it's possible to put it back together without creating a bigger mess. You twist it gently, you rotate it, even whisper apologies to it, hoping it'll forgive you and magically reattach itself. The hook here is obvious. The more ridiculous your attempts to fix it, the funnier it becomes. Everyone watching can relate to the absurd mental gymnastics we perform when faced with our own mistakes. Nate's storytelling shines by amplifying these small human behaviors into laugh out loud moments that feel painfully authentic. Then comes the social embarrassment. You're standing there half bent, holding broken metal in your hands, hoping no one saw you make this disaster. But of course, someone does. Your spouse or partner walks in, sees the wreckage, and gives you the look that says, really, this is what you thought you could handle. And that, my friends, and they're smart, is the hook that elevates the story from a physical mishap to full comedic glory. It's the human reaction, the silent judgment. That turns a doorknob disaster into a moment of universal relatability. Next, there's the desperate problem, solving phase. You try to reassemble the pieces, line them up, wiggle the screws in, hoping for a miracle. You're talking to yourself, pacing, perhaps even shaking the door gently, trying to coax it into submission. And the hook is in the absurd escalation. Every step you take to fix the situation only highlights how completely unprepared you were for it. The audience is fully invested at this point, laughing at the tension between your earnest effort and the inevitable failure. Nate's genius is in letting us live in that tension, amplifying the small frustrations of everyday life until they become hilarious stories. Comes the physical comedy of being trapped by your own failure. The doorknob now completely broken, the latch misaligned. You're locked in your own bathroom, which somehow makes the situation even more ridiculous. You try to open the door with fingers, elbows, even the edge of the broken knob, but nothing works. The hook here is perfect. The combination of helplessness and absurdity keeps the audience laughing while cringing at the scenario. They know how small actions can snowball into massive chaos, and they're hooked because it's painfully relatable. Every little detail adds layers to the story. The wobbling doorknob, the clumsy attempts to fix it, the internal panic, the silent judgment of those around you. Each element is a hook, drawing the audience deeper into the narrative, amplifying the humor while keeping the tension alive. Nate's storytelling excels here, turning a minor home repair into a full-blown comedic saga where ordinary objects become characters, your pride becomes collateral. They're smart, and the audience can't stop laughing because they've all been exactly where you are. Just when you've fully accepted that you are the architect of your own domestic disaster, help arrives in the form of a professional. There's something inherently humbling and instantly comedic about watching someone walk in, glance at your chaos, know exactly what to do without hesitation. The hook strikes. Immediately you've spent all this time struggling, panicking, and improvising, and now someone casually dismantles the problem in a way that makes you question every decision you've ever made. Nate's humor thrives on that contrast, the clumsy, frantic amateur versus the calm, efficient expert. It's a combination of awe and embarrassment, all wrapped into a moment that's as relatable as it is hilarious. Watching a professional work is almost mesmerizing. They move with purpose and precision, like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of tools. Every twist of the screwdriver, every adjustment of the latch, executed with confidence that you can't help but admire and secretly resent. The hook here is in your internal commentary. You're simultaneously impressed, humiliated, and laughing at yourself for thinking you could have handled it alone. Nate's style captures that exact human response, recognizing your own folly while marveling at someone else's skill. There's a subtle psychological layer too. When the professional glances at you, you get the look. Not anger, not judgment, smart. Just calm, knowing, experienced acknowledgement. That glance is its own punchline. It communicates, I've seen this before. Yes, you're the classic case. And that's the hook. The audience instantly connects with that moment of silent, mutual understanding. You are undeniably outmatched. And it's funny because it's true to life. Everyone watching knows the feeling of being rescued by someone who makes things look effortless, making your own struggles seem simultaneously absurd and relatable. Then comes the rapid resolution. While you've spent countless minutes, or maybe even hours, fiddling, panicking, and attempting improbable solutions, the professional fixes the doorknob in 5 minutes flat. Just like that. The hook here is in the timing. The audience can feel your suffering, your desperation, and the painstaking buildup. Watch it dissolve instantly with a casual flick of the wrist. It's a perfect comedic beat, highlighting the gap between human overconfidence and real skill. Nate's humor often shines in these contrasts, the exaggerated buildup of tension, followed by a quick, almost anticlimactic resolution that leaves everyone laughing. Your role in this scene shifts instantly. You go from active participant to observer, standing awkwardly, holding broken pieces, and watching a master at work. There's a humility in that transition that is inherently funny because it's so universal. Everyone has had that moment when you realize someone else can do in minutes what you've been struggling with endlessly. All you can do is stand there, part impressed, part ashamed, part laughing at your own ineptitude. Even after the professional leaves, the memory lingers. The doorknob is functional again, but the experience becomes a story, lesson, and a joke all rolled into one. The hook is the lasting impact. The audience is reminded that overconfidence is dangerous. Small mistakes can snowball into disasters, and professionals exist for a reason. Nate's comedic style turns all of these elements into laughter, relatability, and storytelling brilliance. The rescue, not just a solution, but an essential part of the comedy itself. After the professional has worked their magic and restored the doorknob to its rightful place, a new reality sets in, one that's both humbling and, oddly enough, empowering. The hook here is immediate. You've witnessed the contrast between chaos and competence, between fumbling and precision. Leaves a mark. Suddenly there's an unspoken rule in the house: some things are just not for you. Tools, screws, latches, doorknobs. These objects now have boundaries, and you are clearly on the wrong side. Nate's humor thrives on these subtle realizations, taking the audience through the absurd yet relatable evolution of a man learning the hard limits of his abilities. It's funny because everyone recognizes themselves in that moment, that instant when pride meets reality and reality wins. From that point on, approaching any broken item comes with caution. You glance at the toolbox, your fingers itching to intervene, but the memory of the lost screw, the dangling doorknob, and the professional's effortless solution flashes in your mind. The hook strikes again. The mere sight of tools or hardware triggers an internal dialogue of fear and hesitation. You imagine repeating the disaster, and the humor lies in the hyper-awareness of your past mistakes. Nate's comedic style captures that self-consciousness perfectly, highlighting the tension between curiosity, impulsiveness, survival instincts. Social reinforcement plays a major role as well. Family members, neighbors, anyone who witnessed the fiasco now observe your interactions with household tools with a mix of amusement and quiet relief. Every glance, every casual comment, every sigh acts as a gentle reminder: stay away. The hook is in the subtle humiliation combined with shared understanding. The audience can see the ongoing joke, how a single failed attempt at a simple repair can ripple through your life, changing how you approach ordinary objects. Nate's storytelling thrives on this. Everyday experiences into extended comedic arcs that resonate with anyone who has ever overestimated themselves. You also develop a new role in your household. You become the planner, the observer, the person who calls in expertise rather than diving in headfirst. There's an ironic empowerment here. By stepping back, avoid further disaster, preserve your dignity, and gain control over chaos without touching a single tool. The hook is in the reversal of expectation. Humor comes from the fact that you thought competence meant doing it yourself. But true competence, it turns out, is knowing when to let someone else handle it. Nate's comedy excels in these inversions, where the punchline is life itself. Every future DIY task becomes an exercise in patience and delegation. You watch professionals, you give advice, you even comment on proper technique, but you never touch the tool. The audience laughs because they see the universal lesson: humans are fallible. Some tasks are better left to those trained for them. The memory of your previous fiasco fuels the humor, creating an ongoing comedic narrative that extends beyond the original disaster. The hook is in the permanence of the lesson. The way a small failure becomes an enduring story, a recurring joke, a gentle reminder of your limits. Finally, the doorknob, once a simple piece of metal, becomes symbolic. It represents humility, the consequences of overconfidence, and the way small events can snowball into memorable experiences. Every glance at the restored hardware evokes a mix of amusement, respect, and a little self-deprecation. The audience is drawn into the narrative because they recognize the absurdity of ordinary life, the lessons hidden in minor disasters, and the comedy that emerges from our repeated, imperfect attempts to control it. Nate's genius is in turning this small object into a story that entertains, teaches, resonates with everyone who has ever tried and spectacularly failed to fix something simple. So after all that chaos, and because the reality, I didn't just try to fix a doorknob, I accidentally created a full-blown disaster, tested the limits of my own confidence, and proved once again that some things in life are better left to the professionals. The funniest part is that it started with such a simple idea, just a little fix, nothing big, and somehow escalated into a story I'll be telling for years. The lesson: overconfidence can turn the simplest tasks into epic failures, and that's okay, because at least it makes for a good story. Really, isn't that life? You try, you mess up, someone else fixes it, and you get to laugh about it later. So now, whenever I see a loose doorknob, I step back, smile, let the grown-up handle it, because some victories are just meant to be observed.